Okay, today we're going to start on Mem Zayin Amud Aleph by Reish Lakish. It says Reish Lamed in a traditional Gemara. It's, let's say, 8 lines from the top, 9 lines from the top. Okay, we thank Hashem that we're able to learn Torah every day. In this list of our learning, we should have the base of Mikdash immediately. And also, we're learning for a first name from my father and for Naftali and Menucha Bela. The Gemara starts like this: by Reish Lakish. Lakish asks the question: someone bows down to a palm tree. Lulav ma'ala mitzvah. Are you allowed to use the lulav for lulav? Maybe you messed up the tree. Now you can't use it anymore for the lulav. We had a similar question before about Rami Bar Chama. If someone bows down to a mountain, are you allowed to use the stones for the mizbeach? Right? We had another question from Rami Bar Chama. If someone bows down to stalks of wheat, are you allowed to use it for the menachas? So here, it's not really a Beis Hamikdash question now. Now it's more of just a mitzvah. Are you allowed to use the lulav to shake the lulav on sukkahs? If the tree was planted originally to be an idol, then we don't have any question about this. That would be an Asherah tree. That would be prohibited. If it was planted originally for as an idol to be worshipped. Here, it wasn't planted for that. Someone just bowed down to it. Our question is, a tree that was planted regularly, innocent tree, someone came along and bowed down to it. Also, to add in that we had an opinion of Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Yehuda before. It was on Memhei Amud Beis. Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Yehuda said that Tachas Kol Yitzranan Vashirem Tisrufim Beish. We learned from the pasuk that even if you bow down afterwards, Ilan Shanatul B'Seif Avdu is Aser. That's our opinion of Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Yehuda. According to Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Yehuda, he has this very strict opinion here. He would hold, I feel the head Yitnami Aser. He would hold that it's Aser, even for a regular person. He would hold that it's prohibited. What are you asking? That only had to do with how to get rid of how to be mevatel. If it was a Jew, then it's never permissible. If it was a non-Jew, then he could be mevatel. And we're not talking about getting rid of the prohibition. We're asking if it is prohibited. Right? The question is according to the Rabbanon that say that only if it was planted originally, but not if someone worshipped it later. The question is, Lenin mitzvah mai. Our question is, what about when it comes to performing the mitzvah? Do we say that it needs to be more pure in order to use it for a mitzvah? And since someone bowed down to it, they ruined it? Or do we say not like that? Imagine someone that's, if you have the wrong thoughts in your tefillin, the tefillin became puzzle. Imagine that. It's finished. That's it. How are you ever supposed to know if the tefillin are puzzle or not? Someone had the wrong thoughts in the tefillin. Here, you have a lulav. And Eli Rafaelov is selling the lulav. How are you supposed to know if someone bowed down to that tree and where they got it from in Egypt? How are you supposed to know? It doesn't say anything on the lulav. It's just the. It have to be the owner. Yeah, it wouldn't be. Someone else can't prohibit it. It have to be the owner. But when you're not buying it directly from the owner, going through a broker and all of this. If the halacha was like this, then we would have to know the owner and we have to know where it was planted. It would have to come like this. Do we say that to use it for for a mitzvah, for the Eberster, it's considered disgusting and you can't use it anymore? Or do we say not? We say that, look, it's not prohibited for a person, a regular person to use. So it shouldn't be a problem. Now, all of this is based on one side of the question that we had before. If yesh nevad b'mechuber. We had a question when we asked by the stone, by the boulders, said that if the mountain doesn't become aser, the question is, do we consider it neva? Do we consider it worshipped when it comes to the mizbeach? Because it's attached to the ground and it doesn't become aser for a regular person. It doesn't become prohibited for a regular person to benefit from that mountain. But do we say that for the mizbeach it's different? It's considered nevad. Okay, so if we say yes, that it is nevad, we had a question about it. But if we take one side of that in this flow chart and we end up saying that that is prohibited, that is a problem, what about a mitzvah? Do you say that it's the same thing applies to a mitzvah? Well, Kiyasir Abdimi Amar, when Abdimi came, he said, Ba'asheira shebitla k'mi ba'ilei. Talking about the question over here of Rish Lakish was that when there was an Asherah, and we're talking about an Asherah that was, you were mevatel it. You made it not a Asherah tree anymore. How do you do that? The way you do that is if you cut off the part that was worshipped. In other words, in the next Mishnah, not the next Mishnah, two Mishnayos, three Mishnayos later. On the top of Memches, it says that Shalish Asherah, three types of Asherahs. One of them is that if you trimmed it because you wanted to now use it as an idol. So after you trim it, it grows thicker, right? It grows more. So you trimmed it, and then you want, in order to use it as an idol, and then it continued to grow. So how do you be mevatel that? You cut off the new growths. So here the question is, after you cut off the new growths, can you now use the tree, other parts of the tree, for the lulav? Now the question is, do we say that there was a moment in time when this tree was prohibited from being used, when it was an Asherah? There was a moment in time when this was prohibited. You couldn't use it because it was an Asherah. And Asherah is Asher for everyone. It's Asher ba'ana. You can't have benefit from the Asherah tree. So you also can't use it for a lulav. Even if you say mitzvah slav lihanisnit, no, it'd still be a problem. You couldn't use it. Say ketute mechdas shiura, says in the Gemara in Sukkah. So why can't you use the lulav from an Asherah tree? Because it doesn't have any measurement. Since it needs to be burnt, so it's as if it's burnt, so therefore you don't have the right size. That's what the Gemara says. So anyway, over here, it was rejected for that temporary time from being used. The question is, once something's rejected, does it ever come back to being accepted? Do we say that once it's rejected, it can't come back, or not? It's a sugya that's mainly about karbanos. If there's something that was rejected, and then can it then be used later? So the Gemara says that our question here is based on this question. Do we say yesh dichetzel mitzvahs? This is a sugya in Masechta Sukkah as well. The Gemara says, one second, tifshalei miditanan. We could answer this because we have a Mishnah in where's this Mishnah in Chulin? It says kiso v'neskala, by birds and wild animals. When you shech them, you have to cover the blood with dirt, not by animals, just by birds and wild animals. We do this by kaparas. People they cover the blood because it's a bird. So let's say the blood that was on the floor, you covered it, v'niskala. And the wind came, or someone was walking, and he kicked the dirt off the top of the blood, and now it's open. So pater melachasis, you don't have to cover the blood again. Kisoa ruach, let's say he didn't cover it, but let's say the wind came and covered the blood. It was a big windstorm, and the dust storm, and it covered the blood. So it says, well, chayav l'chasis, you have to cover it again. Just 1 second. Why do you have to cover it again? Because the wind came and blew it back off. So the wind blew it on, the wind blew it off. It was never covered. You have to cover it again. But if the wind did not blow it off, it just blew it on, then then you don't need to cover it. It's all good, right? That means that there's a moment in time when you don't need to do the mitzvah. The mitzvah is done. Then it goes off. Now you need to do the mitzvah again. But there was a moment when you don't need to do it. 1 second. If there's a moment in time when you don't need to do the mitzvah because the wind covered it, so what's the difference if the wind now blew the dust off and now it's exposed? Once it was rejected from performing the mitzvah because it was covered, maybe you shouldn't have to do it again. The mitzvah was already taken away. Rav Papa says this is a proof that we don't say dichetzel mitzvahs. We don't say that once it's rejected, you don't have to do it again, or you can't do it again. We say that even if it's rejected for temporarily, so what? It comes back. Well, if that's the case, then we should say the same thing back by the lulav. We should say that once it was an asherah, so you think it's rejected, and now when you cut off the new growth, it becomes not an asherah, so you can't do the mitzvah again. We have an answer. Rav Papa answered that you can do the mitzvah again because the rejection is nothing. The Gemara says, "The Rav Papa gufei bailei." What we really wanted to know is even in Rav Papa. I know what Rav Papa says, but the question is, we have to analyze what did Rav Papa mean when he said that. Did he mean mifsheh pshit leil Rav Papa? Is it very clear to Rav Papa? Did Rav Papa make a statement that there's absolutely no such thing as rejection by a mitzvah, whether it's for it to be lenient, for example, in our case, that you're now allowed to use the asherah tree for the lulav, or l'chumra, or to say that you have to go back and cover it. Or maybe Rav Papa was just being strict. He wasn't sure. And what he meant was that you only have to be strict over here, which means that you have to cover it again. But it doesn't mean that you're allowed to use the asherah tree. That was just because someone said that's the halacha, that's what you're supposed to do. That doesn't mean that that's what he holds. Could mean that he just has a doubt. So he told you to be strict. And you can't extrapolate from that you can also be lenient in other cases based on the same logic. Because maybe he didn't even accept that logic fully. He only accepted it to be strict. He was only concerned about it. So the two cases here that we're dealing with are covering the blood. There was dichay, and it says that you have to cover it again. That's just being strict. Or Papa says you have to cover it again, which means that there's no rejection by mitzvah. In our case, by the lulav, where are you allowed to use this lulav? If we say there's no rejection, then we're being lenient. The case of Rav Papa, where he said there's no rejection, that's where he was being strict. He said you have to cover it again. The case that we're asking is we're being lenient. Are you allowed to use the lulav that was at one time part of an asherah tree? So when Rav Papa said you have to be strict, did that mean also that you could be lenient?
But it's like it's fulfilling the mitzvah. The wind blew it, okay, but the person wants to do it.
Did it say?
Why?
It said chayav. It says he's obligated. Okay.
Why not accept?
He's obligated to. What does obligated mean? Does it mean that he's really obligated? It doesn't mean that he may be obligated, so that you better do it. No, a lot of times you do things because just to be safe. right? What happens is, if you say no, it's not just to be safe. It's because this is the halacha. Comes out a leniency from that. Comes out when it comes to the lulav, we're going to say that you're allowed to use a lulav from an asher tree. Why? Because ein dichei mitzvahs. But maybe Rav Papa only told you to be strict, not because he really held that it's 100% like that. He said, well, it's better to be strict because we don't know the answer. Okay. So now we're holding teku. That's the Gemara. Teku means let it be standing. We don't have an answer to this question. Question is, what did Rav Papa mean? This is all based in Rav Dimi, that said that the question was about Tichetz mitzvahs. The question is, what does Rav Papa mean? Now, I think Rav Papa is well after Rav Dimi. Rav Dimi came, I think, in the time of Abaya. Rav Papa is a student. But the idea is the question of Rav Papa that existed, that we have, it's retold in the name of Rav Papa. That question, that question that we have on that opinion still existed in the days of a generation earlier. Okay, next question. Boy, Rav Papa. Rav Papa has a question. This is Rav Papa himself. Before it was Rish Lakish. Someone bows down to an animal, right? He thinks the animal is some sort of god. He bows down to it. Are you allowed to use the wool for tzitzis? Tchelis demai. What do you say? Tchelis. Tchelis means the purple wool, the blue wool. What are you arguing is purple? Tchelis is blue. What type of tchelis are you concerned about? Eat tchelis l'kayanim. If it's because you're making the garments of the kayanim that you need the blue wool. So Haina Baida Rami Bar Chama. Rami Bar Chama asked the question before about a mizbeach. He asked the question about pamaschitim. But the main thing was the mizbeach was the question. But the question by the mizbeach was if you're allowed to take the stones of this mountain that was worshipped, you're allowed to use those stones for the altar. And we were explaining over there that if it would be an actual karban, we have no question that you're not allowed to use it because it's nevad. It was worshipped. Anything that's worshipped is prohibited, right? The question now is, even though it's worshipped, but it's not actually a karban. It's only machshire karban. It's only what helps the karban, the preparatory things for the karban. It allows the karban to be brought. You need a mizbeach to bring the karban, but it's not the actual karban. So here, I have something else. I have the tchelas of the kayanim. The clothing of the kayanim allows the karban to be brought. Something that helps the karban. So we would say that it's Haina Baida Rami Bar Chama. That was Rami Bar Chama's question. If you can use the boulders for the mizbeach, question over here is, can you use the wool for the clothing of the kayanim? It's the same question. So what's Rav Papa asking? Papa doesn't need to repeat the same question with another example. Eat chelas l'tzitzis. But if it's a chelas of tzitzis, Haina Baida Rish Lakish. That was Rish Lakish's question. He asked about the lulav for the mitzvah. Where it says Enachanami, you have a good point over here. The question of Rav Papa was actually asked before. He really, Rav Papa did not need to ask this question. The reason why he asked this, because he had a lot of details that he wanted to discuss. He says, when he said the wool, are you allowed to use the wool for the blue wool? What about karnei malachatzesis? What about the horns? Are you allowed to use the horn for the chatzaitzos? They had chatzaitzos that they would use to play the musical instrument and the trumpet in the temple. Shekel malach. What about using the bone, the thigh bone, to make it into a flute? Chalil. What's the English word for a chalil? That little instrument. It's not a clarinet. That little guy. What's it called?
Harmonica?
No. I don't know. It's like a plastic clarinet.
Loop?
Recorder. So they would make it in this for a Khalil, for a recorder. What about the intestines? Are you allowed to use the strings of the intestines and different parts of it? No, I can hear. Sorry. Was? So what about the cords from the insides, like the veins and sinews? Can you use them for the strings of the harp? That was the old-fashioned harp strings, were made out of animal veins. If we say, this is an interesting machlekes, in the Beis Hamikdash they had music. Was the main music vocal, or was the main music instrumental? Right? What was the main thing? If you say
it depended if it was being a mitzvah, then it could only be vocal. Get it?
A cappella, right?
No, but there's no Beis Hamikdash.
No, but it turns out that based on the Rambam, they kept Tisha B'av in the second Beis Hamikdash.
Second.
That's what they think. They think that in the second Beis Hamikdash they kept Tisha B'av from the first Beis Hamikdash. Anyway, it's a whole discussion. If we hold that the main music in the Beis Hamikdash was the instruments, then for sure it's going to be asur, because you can't do a service in the temple that's based on they're using an idolatrous instrument. Question is, maybe the instrument is not the main service in the temple. The main service in the temple is chazanas. They have all those the choir. And the instrument just goes along, like they have the chazanis recordings. They have a piano there. They have just one instrument. Okay, it's just accompaniment, but the main thing is the singing. And besume kala ba'almo. And all the instrument is just to enhance the voice. Well, my sinan, there's no problem to use it. A dilma, or perhaps afilachi aser. So in other words, in the opinion that holds that ikar shira bepeh, would you be allowed to use this instrument that has strings that were taken from an animal that someone bowed down to? Thank you. Well, leaves us as a question. Okay. Now again, this question was already asked before, but we wanted to bring out that there were other questions here, so that's why we asked it. Boy, Rabba. Rabba has a question. It's interesting because Rabba's before Papa. No, first of all, the mountain could belong to you. It doesn't have to be Hashem. You live on the mountain. You bought it. You acquired it. That's a separate issue. The public area, you can't prohibit something that's public. You were saying even if you own it, you can't prohibit it because it's the way that it was created. Yeah, it doesn't have to do with ownership. There's a separate issue of ownership. Yeah, we're gonna see now something similar to that. So Rabba has a question. Mishtach v'lamaya and meimav mal in a sachem. Someone bows down to a spring of water, a spring of water. Are you allowed to use that water for the pouring of the water on the mizbeach on Sukkot? Did he prohibited all the water of the spring? Mike and me, what's the question? What was he bowing down to? Was he bowing down to his own reflection? What's that Greek guy that was in love with himself? He thought he was so beautiful.
So beautiful.
So he's bowing down to his own reflection. Maybe he's bowing down to the water. 1 second. It says, if this is your question, so why are you asking about a Mayan? Now the spring. You have the name?
I wasn't looking for it, but that's not what.
When it comes to the spring, which is attached to the ground, which is the way it was originally created, which cannot become prohibited, the whole question is only for the Beis Hamikdash. But if our question is
Adonis.
The shirts.
the question is the same question we can have, even if it's for a hedyot, and it could be not attached to the ground, not in a mine. You have a bucket of water. The question is, when a person bowed down to this bucket of water, did he bow down to his own reflection, and therefore the water should not be prohibited, or did he bow down to the water? So the Gemara says, "Lo'ilam l'maya kasagid." No, that's not our question. We know that he's bowing down to the
narcissist. That's where narcissism.
Oh, narcissist. Okay. And our question is as follows: Lamaya de kamei kasagid. Was he bowing down to the water that was in front of him? The kamai yazdu. And when the nature of water is that it flows, he bowed down to that water, not to this water. That water is already under the bridge. Or perhaps ledabruna demai kasagid. He was bowing down to the flow of the water. The flow of the water is still flowing. So he's Mi Mitzri, so does it become? I'm sorry. Now the Gemara asks a question. Mi Mitzri, and should this become Aser? Rabbi Yochanan says, name of Rabbi Shimon ben Yitzchak, that you can't prohibit things that belong to the public because it's not yours. And the water, we're assuming, belongs to the public. So it's like Tricha, the Kanivin Meyara. We're talking about where it doesn't belong to the public. It's coming out of the ground. Yes, his own property.
That seems to be a non sequitur. You're first saying maybe he was bowing down to water that was flowing. Well, that means whatever he bowed down to is now gone. The new water is not what he bowed down to, so that shouldn't have any possible issue on it. And then you give an answer that has nothing to do with it. You're giving better public answer. I don't understand the statement before. The answer is a non sequitur.
Bottom
Yeah,
line is
two
you
options,
said the
right?
term water. Like
There are two options here.
A and B, right? Column A and column B.
One option is he's bowing down to the actual water. Now the problem is that water is already under the bridge. Water now is new water. The other option is he wasn't bowing down to the actual water. Bowing down to the rush,
mighty Mississippi.
to the rush of the water, the flow of the water. The flow of the water is still going. And it continues that.
Nile.
You see him running after the water.
The elevator does not go up to the top floor in that guy.
There's an R at the end of water.
Yeah. Okay.
Guys, you're delaying this year.
Mishnah says like this. Mishahaya, the wording that we have is Mishahaya Basi Samach Lavid Zchav Menachal. The other version of this is Mishahaya Kaislai Samach Lavid Zchav Menachal. Doesn't matter. Same idea. What happened was there was a church, and someone set up his house to have 3 walls attached to this 4th wall of the church. So he lives right next door to the church. He said, "Why not? I'll use that wall, and I'll have a house. They already have 1 wall there, so I'll just build attached. Maybe it's a townhouse." So yeah, for a sukkah they use 1 wall. Now the problem is that 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 wall collapsed. The person wants to build it back. It says, "Also live nicely, you're not allowed to build it. You'll be building a church." We're talking about here that they actually worship the house itself, not that they worshiped, not as a church, but a place where they worshiped other things. They worship the house. You're not allowed to build the Avodah Zara. Ketzad Yasser. Right, house of worship. Okay, so what should he do? Kindness b'tayich shalayar b'amas abayna. You have to come into your own property for Amos and build your wall. What's going to be in the middle over there? It's going to have that empty space. For Amos, empty space. The Gemara says, what happened? The Mishnah says, that was because the wall was on the side of the Avodah Zara. But let's say the wall was on smack in middle. You had two, the property, the wall, let's say, is 2 amas thick. And 1 amma was in your territory, 1 amma was in the church territory. So then when it comes to taking it in 4 amas into your property to build a new wall, then nidan mechza mechza. You start 1 amma into the wall. So now it's going to be 3 amas apart. 3, because 3 amas from the old wall. Because that wall was already partially in your property as well. So when you build a new wall, you only take it 3 amas away from where the old wall was. Not like the last case where you took it 4 amas away from where the old wall, because that was built on the church property. Avana of Eitza v'afrei metamik kasheretz. What happens to the pieces from that wall that collapsed? So the first opinion here says that it's tummy like a sheretz. Sheretz is a creeping creature, and you say that if you touch it, it's going to be makes a person tummy. We don't say that half the wall is not tummy, half the wall is tummy. We say that the entire wall is tummy. We say ein breira, that the bricks of this wall, you don't divide it up and say, well, now we know which side was yours, which side was his. We don't say that. We say the whole wall is tummy. Yeah.
Church.
I would assume the answer is because when they're selling it, they're mevatel it.
Oh, yeah. This is all from here.
It didn't say that the issue was because it's like lifnei iver. It said you're not allowed to do it because you're not allowed to build the idol. Yeah, I think when they buy a church, it's because they're selling it. When they sell it, they're being mevatel it. Big shaila if you're allowed to pay rent. Pay rent to a church. The church owns a property, you're allowed to pay rent there. I think they're lenient because anyone could rent it. The church isn't really making money from the fact that you're there. If it would be something that no one else would rent, that could be more of an issue. But if it seems like we had the Gemara before about the merchats using the bathhouse. Over there, I think every person that goes to it pays money. If it really would be an idol, he said it's not a problem, even though there was an idol in the bathhouse. But that wasn't a problem because the bathhouse wasn't a decoration for the idol. The idol was just there as a decoration for the bathhouse. That was what Ram Gamliel said, remember? But if it would actually belong to an idol, and what you were paying would be paying think of it there, I think there would be a problem because every person that goes pays more. It's not that one person uses it. One person uses it, so if you don't use it, someone else will use it. So they're not really making money because you used it. You're just taking up the spot from someone else. Anyway, what is this? The campsites, because it's owned by property is owned by the church. Yeah.
a certain camp, like, they, the five related camps, they were, say, X's on the wall and they had covered.
One of the yeshivas I was in,
The shavings?
Josh, I was with your brother.
Josh,
We
can you
had
tell me?
we were in a, it was,
In
a
Albany,
house.
Albany.
Yeah. There's a house right next door to the church. It was the priest's house. And in there where they found the holy water and all the good stuff. All the
Cracker is really good.
anyway, it was wild. Okay.
As long as there were no binoculars.
What is that?
Oh, come on, move on, move on, move on,
Oh,
move on,
okay.
move on.
So,
Now we
okay,
should-
one opinion here is that it's tummy like a sheket, like, which means a sheret. Rabbi Kiva and Mekanida. Rabbi Kiva says that it's tummy like a nida, which is different, more strict. So shnemar tizarin k'maydava, tzeitar melay, flows. It flows like a flow. Say, tell it to go out. Ma nida metame mas, just like a nida is tummy, just even without touching, just carrying. So in other words, if you lift up the idol, even if you don't touch it, put out gloves, put it in a bag, and it's wrapped up. But once you lift it off the ground, it's tummy. It makes the person tummy. Okay, now the Gemara asks an interesting question. We said that we have to leave space to move in your land for Amos, so not to build a wall of the idol. But you're giving more area to the idol. You know what they're going to do? They're going to now have more space to run around. So they have an open wall. Going to make it into a Florida room. No, you're not giving it to them. You're turning it into a bathroom. You're going to use it as a bathroom. You can't use it as a bathroom. The whole church is looking at you. It says, David le Beisakisi Delilah. No, you only use it as a bathroom at night. But the master Torah says, what's a person that's modest? That if you go to the bathroom at night, the same way you go by day. Even though we said that it was talking about the same way that you go to the bathroom, the way that you uncover this and that by day, by night, you do the same by day. It's news by the method, but it still has to be done in a modest way, but you don't have people watching you. So no, you made it for children. Inami the gadle behizmi vigni, or you put up a makeshift mechitza so they can't look in.
By the Romans, their bathrooms were like bathhouses with stools, and then they had a mini kind of river that ran under it. Then they come in and sit down, all public, but they're covered. They do their business, and then they just take it away like this many streams. I mean, this public bathrooms, but
right?
It's the boy.
You're adding a lot of gross stuff.
Shleisha batamim. Two types of houses of idolatry. One is there's a new Mishnah, yeah. It was a house that was built originally to be worshipped. That's the way it was built. It's not just that it was housing an idol, but it was built to be worshipped. It's aser. Another type. You plastered it or decorated it for worship. So then, what do you do then? If you want to then use the house, you just have to take off the plaster. You get what's his name, Yossi, come with the no, he does the water pressure cleaning.
Oh, the Russian
pressure cleaner. Let's say you put in an idol into the house. You took it out. That's fine. You didn't do anything to the house. There was no additions to the house. It was just you brought it in. So take it out, and the house is fine. Amarav, yeah, is a question?
What would be an example? It's like
The pyramids was just a tomb. What are you talking about? Where they worship the actual house? They worship they bow down to some rock somewhere. They bow down to the thing. Yeah, you have a shaila on what they worship. They worshipped anything they
From
found.
Far East cultures, you go in the rooms, shrine.
Yeah.
idols.
Nobody's saying more than that it's a shrine with the idol. You actually worship this house itself.
Like
That's
Graceland.
where they would put.
No,
Like Graceland.
not that they're worshiping an idol that's housed inside a house. They're worshiping a house.
Like Graceland in Memphis.
Worshiping the
Elvis.
house.
Oh yeah.
Where Elvis.
That's why I can't
Uh.
think of anything.
So it's an example.
He said Elvis's house.
Elvis's house, Graceland. The people.
Okay,
But you know what?
you found one.
Elvis is still in the building.
Amar Rav. Rav says, if someone bows down to a house, usher, you make the house usher. One second. How did he make the house usher? The house is attached to the ground. We said that things that are attached to the ground don't become usher. It must be that Rav holds attached to the ground doesn't become usher. That's only when it was originally attached to the ground, like a mountain or a tree that was always. But here you took wood that wasn't attached to the ground and then you attached it to the ground. That could still become usher. That must be what Rav holds. The Gemara says, 1 second. If that's the case, we said that the only way that it becomes usher is if you actually built it for that purpose. You're coming to tell me that even if you didn't build it for that purpose, even if you just bowed down to it and it wasn't built for that purpose, it's still usher. So our Mishnah seems to contradict Rav. Rav says that if you bow down to an already built house, it becomes usher. And we said that you had to build it for that to become usher. The Gemara says like this. The chiddush of our Mishnah is if you built it for an idol, even if you never bow down to it, it's already usher. Or if you bow down to it, even if you didn't build it for that. So there's 2 options how it becomes usher. If there's 2 options how the house becomes usher, Hani Shleisha, why do you say there's only 3 types of houses of Avodah Zara? There's now 4. One of them is if you bow down to it, which we didn't list in the Mishnah. Where it says, no. When it comes to bittul, bowing down to it or building it for this purpose is all one. So therefore, there's only 3 types when it comes to taking it away. There's 4 types making it, but there's 3 types taking it. We're talking about the 3 types taking it away, being mevatel. There's 3 types of stone. One is a stone that was hewn originally to be used as a base for an idol, which they worship the whole thing together. Harizu asura. That's asur because it was hewn for that purpose. Sida v'kaida l'shem avedis kechavim. Let's say it was plastered or decorated for an idol. So then let's you just take off the extra decoration. Let's say you just put an idol on it, on the stone. Then that's not a problem. You take it off. It's fine. You take it off. Rabami says the middle case that you said that if you plaster it, that's only if you took the actual stone and you carved into the actual stone. That's when it becomes usher, and you have to chisel out what the engravings that you did. The Gemara says, 1 second. The Gemara asks, "Vadumya the bias tanan, the bias la begufi mitzar." Where should be comparable to the house, and when you put plaster on the house, that's comparable to putting plaster on the stone. Putting plaster on the house doesn't mean that you engraved into the house. It just means you put plaster on it. So the Gemara says, "Bias nami ikka bein yorvi." The house also, you have plaster actually in the house itself. Between the bricks, you put plaster. The Gemara says, "Mili askinin d'shia v'hadashia," but you didn't tell me that. You didn't say in the Mishnah, we're talking about that between the bricks, the cement that you put between the bricks was done for the idol. You just told me that you plastered it, which sounds like it was already, the cement between the bricks was already there. You just came along and added plaster on top. The same thing should be by the stone. You didn't understand what Rabami was saying. Rabami wasn't saying that the only way it becomes usher is if it was chiseled into the stone. Rabami is saying that the way that it becomes mutter is even if it was chiseled into the stone. Even though it was chiseled into the stone. But if you chisel it out, then it's going to be permissible. The time I could have thought Kevin should say it with Guf Shalev, Kevin could have thought that this stone is considered like it was hewn originally for an idol. B'titzer kula, and now there's no solution for it, right? We didn't give any solution if it was hewn for an idol. We're thinking now that because it was chiseled out for the idol, maybe the same thing should apply. Kamash Malan comes to teach me that no, chiseled out for the idol doesn't mean that it's hewn for the idol. Hewn for the idol, it's always usher. Chiseled out means you can chisel off the part that you chiseled, and then it would be permissible. Okay, good enough. Remember, pass. Still, I think 2 pages behind. Maybe tomorrow night we could learn. Maybe we'll catch up. So tomorrow, this. Getting there.
You'll plan to recite this?
Do we have something tomorrow? Is something going on? No. Okay.
Yeah,
Have a good day, everyone.